You can have a great sales process. You can walk into a situation, you can own the place. You've got 7 steps, you're ultra prepared, your product is great, you've got all the experience, and you walk in and you get 30 minutes of the way through your presentation and the buyer gets cold feet or the decision maker isn't in the room. But really, what's at the very bottom of it all is that the buyer doesn't trust you. The first question that any buyer asks when they are looking at an opportunity is this person I'm talking to trustworthy? Are they genuine? Are they competent? So how do you develop a connection with your buyer? You're a storyteller. So rather than coming in all guns ablaze and starting in and talking about business, we have to remember that buyers, they like to feel safe, especially now. Why is storytelling so important? Well, because today in the modern atmosphere of selling business to business, most of the buyers are already 60 to 70% of their way into the buying cycle. They've already determined their needs. They've already researched price. They've already looked at competitors. They've probably been influenced by someone else. So they're way far along. They're already kind of their own seller. And some of the information they have is probably inaccurate. It's probably not good thinking. But we don't want to make the buyer feel stupid. Of course, the buyer is doing the best thing that they can to feel control. So by the time you get to them, they've already gone 60% of the way, and this is where it really frustrates the salesperson, is that they are starting from the beginning and they're misaligned with where the buyer is. And this is where storytelling becomes really important. And so one of the things that we instruct coach clients to do when they're selling high commission paid type opportunities, and they want to really get a great chance at an opportunity, is that they start to move conversations into a different direction. And by telling a story, it means that you go back in time and you look at your best accomplishments, you look at examples that are corollary with the person you're talking to today, and they have a setting, and they have a struggle, and a turning point, and a resolve, and you're about ready to participate in the story, the transformation of this buyer that you're going to help. But you've done that for other buyers. So can you go back and look at some of the best wins and the best achievements that you've had where you've really gone to bat for someone, you did your best work, and so when you start the sales opportunity, it's really more about finding a connection and going into those moments where you're going to tell those stories. And those stories are real, they're anecdotal, they're based on experience. And so it's about slowing things down, and you don't just lead into the process until you get this connection going. Because like I said, not having that connection is like moving along and you get so far ahead of the buyer that they're not with you. And so one of the biggest mistakes that I see great salespeople make is they don't have a connection with the buyer. And you can't qualify their needs. You can't open a conversation about how they see themselves utilizing the help of someone like you unless you have turned toward that question: why should I trust you? Is there a connection? Do I feel safe? The second most common mistake for salespeople is failure to disqualify. Man, I catch them on this all the time. And so we use a system called BANT: budget, access to power, need, and time. How many times have you gone into a sales opportunity, you get all the way to the end, and you find out that you weren't affordable? Wouldn't it have been nice to know up front, instead of practicing, that you were affordable? And I think a very easy way to ask this is to maybe bracket the high and low of what your price point could be and say, Mr. Buyer, if we get down the line and you want to move forward, if I'm going to come in somewhere between this and this, are you comfortable with that? Is that something that you're going to be able to do? And I like to be upfront about that because, again, if someone can't afford you, they just can't, they're in the wrong market, they're not the right buyer, then it's best to just, move on to someone who can be. And so you want to make sure that they can write the size check that you're probably going to be asking for. And so being upfront about that is something I highly recommend. And it takes some of the nerves out, that the buyer doesn't have to feel uncomfortable or anxious up front, but instead that you're upfront about that. Having access to power. Yeah, I mean, if down the line you like what you see, are you going to be able to make the decision on your own? If you like what you see, is there anyone else who would need to assist in making a final decision on our services or products? And so you ask that, and then you might go through some hypotheticals. So you don't need to talk to a lawyer. You don't need to talk to your CPA. So you don't need to talk to your spouse. No, I'm the one that writes the checks. Okay. Don't miss on this. If you're really successful, don't go soft on this, because if you miss the decision maker and down the line, we have to remember that they will never sell your products or services to a spouse or to someone else, what I call a Seymour, someone that's going to be tasked with seeing more, a power sponsor, a Seymour. They will never be able to get the kind of energy and emotion that this buyer got from you. And so we need to make sure also that the access to power, the decision maker that we have, they have pain points. They have priorities that are going to resonate with the benefits and advantages of your services. And so if you're selling to, let's say, CEOs or vice presidents or directors, you want to make sure that the KPIs, key performance indicators, that are inherent in their role are directly corollary with some of the drivers of your product or service. There needs to be alignment between where you pinpoint the pain, where you pinpoint the situation that needs help, and what the person is measured for to be successful. So always make sure that you qualify in your pre-call research that they are the right role in the person to care about the areas that you're going to help with so that it's emotional, right? People don't care what you say. It's not about what you do. It's about how you make them feel. And so then the need. So what's the motivator? Is there a motivator? Now, let's say up front you bring in, let's say, a menu of pain. Let's say that you're selling services, and let's say you bring up a number of pain points and you state typical situations that your buyers are having. Now, your buyer may have several responses here. They may say, well, I'm having that problem that you're describing. Okay, well, tell me about it. What's the problem? Or, I'm not having that problem, but I'm having a different problem. Well, tell me about it. What's the problem? Or, I'm not having a problem. Or, I just don't trust you and I'm not giving you any good information. Or, yeah, I know the problem that I'm having, but I'm already on the process of solving it. So, much like Karate Kid, you need to have the verbal jiu-jitsu to be ready for all 5 of those responses. But also make sure that your menu of pain is clear on the typical situations that make them emotional. So, Mr. Buyer, here are 10 typical situations where people need my help. Number 1, they're frustrated with X. Number 2, when they're involved with this tends to happen, and this starts to concern them because X. And they're also a bit anxious about X. And they're also a bit concerned about this. So when they hear that, in other words, you're going to be activating either a pain that they've recognized, so it's already activated before you came into the sequence, and they're already onto a solution about it, or maybe they just have an active concern. Now, my hope is that you will be the one to instigate that concern. You'll start it. You'll light the matchstick. And if you do, you'll have a lot more efficiency because they may not have anything to compare anybody to. In other words, they're not going to go head-to-head with another competitor in saying, well, I'd like to get your bid, and here, let me kind of look at where someone else is, and I'll pick the one for the least cost. You know that. It eats at your profits. You become a commodity. So the idea is you want to start getting a demand going for what you're doing. Those are the best kinds of buyers, and it opens up your conceptual sales territory. So the big idea is you should have a very clear understanding of what resonates with your buyers. And looking at your case history, you should be able to make a menu of pain that is very distinct and very evocative in creating a response. And I recommend that you say that somewhere in the introduction up front, or put it into one of your reference stories, the story that we just talked about, in terms of a setting, a turning point, and a resolve, where you can help the buyer see how you help someone else, and they understand what's possible through you by hearing the story, and they can self-select and activate, I have a need for help here, this is great. But let's remember, they may say, well, I'm having a problem, but I don't know how to solve it, and that involves a certain strategy. Or, I know my problem, I'm already starting to solve it, and then we have to kind of re-engineer their thinking and bias it to our product. So the problem is, today, is that probably 80% of your buyers already have a vision of a solution. So for you to start back at, well, tell me about it, what's going on, they've already gone past that. The question is, tell me how you see yourself using the help of someone like me. Starting to understand their buying vision is a good place to go, and then maybe changing the rules of the game. Would it also help if you had a way to, and would it also help if you could? And this requires you to know your most unique and valuable differentiators, and being able to ask those control capability questions of would it help if X or would it help with Y, or being very situational. When you're in this situation with so-and-so, imagine this, you'd be able to do this. Would that also help? Would it also help? The key word also. So I'm adding on and kind of widening the circle on their pre-existing notions or their preconceptions about what they think they need. Again, we don't want to make a buyer feel inadequate. We want to make sure that we add on and enhance, not interfere with what they already have in mind, and that's the art. And then we want to wedge it against or compare it to how they do it today. So how do you do it today without these capabilities? And talk about the impact of that, and then help align your process or your capabilities with their buying vision. So what we do is teach coaching clients how to have these consultative conversations that help the buyer feel emotional, help them feel good about their ideas, and help them solve their own problems with good solutions. But make no mistake about it, you are selling the invisible if you're selling a service. Most of the time, it's about capabilities that they're envisioning. And that when you're starting off with that buyer, you're starting in with, would it also help if you could? Now, they may not even have any idea that was available to them. And so they're kind of denying what they have as a good solution. They're saying, this is not going to be enough. That also would help me. Do you do that? And then it's fun to talk about, let me share with you how. So it's, again, how do you see yourself using the help of someone like me? Would it also help if you had a way to? And today, how do you do it today without these capabilities? And what's the impact of that on who and how? And so by using my new capabilities, does that help you really get to your goal? And that's how you change someone's mind. Persuading them is it's about their idea. Manipulation would be for you. But buying into their own interests is about persuasion, and that means they feel in control. And so you're slowly jogging them into these questions to make sure that there's a motivator there, the need. And then the time. Do you have time to talk and present? You don't make presentations. You have consultations. You sell the conversation. You make the conversation bigger than what you sell. The way you sell is bigger than what you sell. The third mistake is long sales cycles. Every day a salesperson spends on an opportunity, the worse it gets. The buyer forgets, it's harder to follow up. And so this involves alignment. So what do we need to do next with this opportunity? Or how do we get things going? If you don't understand where your buyer is, then ask them. One of the most direct ways is to say, I have a pipeline, and I'm wondering where you are in that pipeline. And I'm wondering what our next step might be. Can I just review the file real quick and just say, here's what I think you're wanting from me. Here's why. Here's the impact. And here are some of the capabilities you're envisioning. Is there some reason why we're not moving forward? And sometimes going back and kind of reviewing the file and reviewing what made them emotional might just re-spark or light the matchstick, and you can go from there. The point is, if you haven't made them emotional enough, one of the reasons why long sales cycles happen is you haven't explored the impact of what it would be without your capabilities or what it could be with them. And so people buy, they make an emotional commitment before they make a financial commitment. So really look at if you're covering that territory. And if they're qualified, if they have the budget, you have the access to power, and you have the need and the mood, and they have the time, you got an hour with them, there shouldn't be any reason why that sales cycle is going on longer. They may just not be feeling safe with you, to be honest, by saying, no, I don't really think I want to do this, or, I think you're ahead of me. I need to go back and evaluate my alternatives before I take action within the risk considerations. So can you go back over again what the benefits and advantages are of your product, and let me help you? One of the things also that I find sellers doing is they get really freaked out when buyers have resistance. The reason why they're reluctant is they do want to go forward with you. They just don't know how to take action within the risks. So what the seller should be doing is reassuring the buyer, letting them know that there's every reason in place that they should do this, and that if they were on their side, they would do it too. So sometimes it's about reassuring the buyer and letting them know that this is a great decision, and here are 5 reasons why other buyers have done the same. Number 4, misapplication of sales resources. Wow. The basic principle in efficient selling is to minimize the time and the resources. But the salesperson often invests their energy on people who are not the right qualified buyers. So we want to make sure that in your menu of pain and your understanding of your buyer, that they are receptive to your message. That's human nature. We all prefer working in our comfort zone, but we want to make sure that we're reaching out to decision makers that are really the right ones. And so to put your sales resources together, it requires kind of a straw man of understanding your buyer at every level. Their preferences, their desires, their core story, the world they live in. And today we have so much information online that you have a luxury to be able to do that, to really do the pre-call research, to ask other resources about them, to get a reverse referral in there. There's so many close and near people in our networks online that we can find people that know them, and we can do all sorts of research to build rapport and to determine if it's a good opportunity. Number 5 is misalignment with the customer. Boy, we get ahead of them because we assume where they are in the process. A buying cycle is, number 1, do I have a need? If I'm going to change my tires, I'm probably going to start a buying cycle because they look bald. I got to do something about them. Can I afford to? Yes. Okay, I got to do something. If I don't, there's big risk. What are my alternatives? Go to Dunlop, go to Big O, have a friend change it, put on my spare. And then I make up my mind about that, and then I'm going to take action, and I'm going to fulfill what my thinking tells me. I'm going to activate. I'm going to make a decision. But, of course, the seller somehow misses this, is that they just go right in and they close before it's closable. Or they don't really identify that the buyer's still evaluating alternatives, and they already start going into selling them on some examples of why they can do what they're talking about. It's too far ahead. So make sure that you're in alignment by green lighting. When you feel that the buyer's needs, it's important to communicate how you're holding that. My understanding is as follows, and I think where we are is this. I'm going to move on right now and find out a little bit more about what you have in mind. But before I do, is there anything I should know? Use green lighting with the buyer to set alignment. Make sure that you're in the right place and you are where they are. Use your compassion and empathy here to not move on until you make sure that they are right with you and that you're leading them and guiding them in a way that is interesting and activating them and moving them closer to getting what they want. Being in alignment with buyers means you make sure that you understand their 3-year vision, that you understand the dangers that they see that are in their way, the things they're afraid of losing, understanding the opportunities that they want to reach, and also the strengths that they want to continue to reinforce. And if you have that platform and you continue building solutions that they can envision around their needs, and you help and compare that to the alternative, and they select that your solution is the right one, and then you green light them into, I'd like to prove to you why I'm 100% confident that I can help you. Can I give you some examples? And then walk them through the proposal before you actually do it. There is no reason why you shouldn't align with them unless they're just the wrong buyer. So you should have caught that upstream. Number 6 is giving unnecessary price concessions at the close. If you don't have enough people in your pipeline or opportunities, you're probably going to compromise. Once you give your buyers discounts, it starts a whole path of being referred as the discount guy. Don't give them concessions. Look for ways to add more value. You should be drawing the line in the negotiations. The seller draws the line. I remember a situation where I bought my first car. We'll call him Mike. And I tried to finagle him. I tried to squeeze his washcloth at least 3 times. On the 3rd time, he looked at me and said with conviction, John, this car is worth every penny of the price point that I'm giving you. I cannot go lower. I think you're getting a really good value for what you're going to invest. And I think it's going to suit you very, very well. But I can't make you do it. So you'll have to think about that. But I'm not able to go any lower. And I think I'm right at a good value here for what you're going to pay for. I walked off. I came back. I bought the car because I knew that he was telling me how valuable it was. And that got me to know that what I was paying for was worth it. My emotional hurdle was I getting the best for my money? His emotional hurdle is, do I have the intestinal fortitude to walk away from the sale if it's not right? Well, we transacted. So obviously his emotional fortitude was balanced. Mine was balanced. I got the best deal for my money. And I drove my GLI red Jetta off that lot as a very proud buyer. And it was the greatest car I ever had. I loved that car. I drove that to and from school. Now, that being said, don't lower your price. Don't go soft. Add more value. Help buyers see why other buyers have paid this kind of money, right? It's not about price. It's about a value justification. So what are we going to measure? Who is responsible? What capabilities are needed? What could be possible in terms of ROI? And when will this price pay for itself? Those are the 5 elements of a value justification. Use those at the closing moment to help the buyer feel at ease. Help them overcome their concerns about costs. And if they're nervous about your costs, it's because they want to buy. They just need a reason why. So by giving them that value justification, it allows them to really think things through. What are we going to measure? The buyer always elects the measurements. Who is responsible for getting that result? What capabilities are needed? This should have been identified. How much is possible in terms of ROI? And when will this investment pay for itself? Number 7, giving without getting. If you're going to give something, ask them for something in return. If they just can't pay the price point, then maybe give them more options. Let them pay in payments. Get creative. Do we want to work together? Okay, great. Excellent. Here's a way I could help you. Or ask for a couple of favorable introductions in exchange for what they want to pay. If they can't pay the price, ask them, how short are you? Maybe you can make up for whatever the deficit is, but maybe they're close. So get creative about it. So if you avoid these mistakes, I want you to just imagine who you would be and what kind of version of yourself you would be able to become. You'd go to the stratosphere. You'd have a system for picking the right buyers. You'd have a process in place to ensure that there's alignment. You would have shorter sales cycles. You'd be able to apply the right sales resources and probably have a lot more fun, build more confidence, and sit in front of qualified buyers so that you're efficient and you don't waste your time. Just imagine what kind of pipeline you could manage. Just imagine what kind of personal production you'd be able to achieve. So, we coach leaders, and great leaders are coached. And one of the key areas is being a buying facilitator. And so there are about 8 areas in high-level performance that we refine our coaching clients. And high-efficiency selling is one of those. And so I like to think of it as selling without the appearance of selling. So if you think you could be a sales gladiator, if you know that there's more in you, let's talk about being a buying facilitator. Let's talk about the standards, the practices, the principles of raising your game as a salesperson. If you're the salesperson and you're listening to me at your company, you should be the highest paid person in the company because you have the golden goose. You are the most important person in there. If you're the sales manager or director, yep, there is no business without sales. You are the most essential component. There's no operations without sales. There's no overhead. There's no staff. There's no office without sales. There's nothing. There's no future without sales. You are the most important lever for this business. So leveraging your resources and investing in your behavior, investing in your capabilities is the greatest thing in the world. And just imagine what it could become. I appreciate the opportunity to share these ideas with you. Thank you for listening. If you'd like more information, go to highlevelperformance.com or just call us, 714-375-6624. Go to highlevelperformance.com or you can email me at vipcoach@highlevelperformance.com. This is JD, the founder of High Level Performance. I appreciated the opportunity to share these ideas with you. Have a kick-butt week. See you soon.